I've just come back from Sim Racing Expo 2024 and I had a little more time to collect my thoughts about Assetto Corsa EVO. If you want to have a look at the first impressions, go have a look. It's pretty interesting, but with more information and more runs at the Sims and also from what the devs have said at SRE 2024, we can get a fuller picture and maybe something a little more informative. But first, let's talk about the most important things, which will be the handling. The original runs were very short because we only had a really just 5-10 minutes on each go to check out some of the cars, but I have time to do it multiple times, so I would be able to get a fuller picture from everything that I've run and from all the experiences that I had in all the three cars. So that was the Porsche Cup, the i30 and the Alpine in the rain. Everything was phenomenal. The selection of cars and tracks was incredibly small. It didn't really include high downforce cars. We had the Porsche Cup as the highest downforce car around there, so it was basically mainly road cars. So there are some aspects of it we don't know. Also the slicks or the way that the Porsche Cup brakes is completely different from GT3, but we can get a good idea, and also we can get a good idea of what cars or how the cars will handle. Starting with the Porsche Cup, yeah, it's one of the best Porsche Cups around there. The car is actually pretty interesting to drive. It has the understeer, it has the oversteer. There's basically not a lot of things that you can do with it. It's not as the GT3 where you have more controls, more traction control, where you have the electronics to help everything out, and the cars get really easy to drive. The Porsche Cup, you do have to muscle it around the track, and you could even go over the curbs. You could have control of the car on a slip angle and all of that. And it kind of reminded me in a way the way that the Assetto Corsa was driving, as it was very sharp, but also the tires felt it had more to give, or it had a little more control on a slip angle like Assetto Corsa Competizione has. So it has a little bit of both. The thing about also Assetto Corsa Competizione was the dull force feedback, and I was able to check it at Logitech and also at Fanatec. And the force feedback, it felt incredibly meaty with True Force, and it felt incredibly precise with Fanatec. So the force feedback implementation in both wheelbases was very well done. It was incredibly easy to understand what's going on. It didn't feel like Assetto Corsa Competizione where it was basically dampened. No, you had full information of what the car was doing and what were the track conditions. And speaking of that, we can speak about the Alpine and the rain. The Alpine would have road tires, and the car felt like it had road tires. It had some grip, as you would expect from a road tire, but at the limit, and the limit comes much closer than it would with the Porsche and its tires. You would see that in the rain, you would easily aquaplane, you would lose the control of the front of the car would spin around if you brake too much. So that was a really interesting way to drive, and I think Bathurst was a really good choice because of the inclinations, and then you have the running water coming in. The changes of weather also, it's really interesting the way that the weather was dynamic, or rather the track was dynamic. They're saying that the track will be as dynamic as Automobilista or 2, or I thought I understood that, so I'm not too sure right about now. So if it's a step up from what we have in Assetto Corsa Competizione, that will be something also positive. Positive was as well the i30. It really felt like a hot hatch. You know, the weight is in the front. If you want to muscle it around the corner, the rear is light. And if you go in sharp, you can do Scandinavian flicks, put the car sideways and then accelerate, and the car will straighten out. You know, exactly like a hot hatch would handle if you go past its limit. The tracks were incredibly well detailed. It kind of felt the way it came from Assetto Corsa Competizione, but they were spec'd up, so it would have more detail. The bumps, everything, the tarmac, everything was well done. It felt really nicely. Also, the sounds of the cars were pretty good. And since we're going to have, I believe, 20 cars at early access, this actually is a good sign. For the graphics, for me, it's a really big step up from Assetto Corsa Competizione, because Unreal Engine 4 always felt very blurry at the distance. It wasn't really tack sharp even at 4K. And even at the Logitech booth, where the computers weren't as powerful, the graphics felt much better, much more detailed. But in Fanatec, we had access to a computer that was basically done just for that, and they basically spec'd it to the roof, and the graphics were absolutely amazing in that the ultra-wide. However, it must be said that the optimization is really not the best in early access at the moment. I had screen tearings in both places. Sometimes the input lag was a little bit too high. You know, it's early alpha, early thing, so it's not really up there, but from what we had, it was actually good, even though I had 2 crashes in some of the 6 or 7 goes I had in one day. For those of you who are with VR, there will be VR at launch, so you'll be happy to know that, but Marco Massaruto put an asterisk in there. They're trying to do the optimization, so if the VR optimization or the VR performance isn't the best at launch, you know, at least expect that, but there will be VR in this game. Also, something really cool that I've noticed from Kunos. Kunos tends to be a little more closed in terms of experience. They curated a lot, and this time they decided to experiment a little bit. People were asking, oh, how is it in motion? And apparently it works in motion. ImSim has Evo in one of their motion simulators, the Alma, and the motion actually is really good. I've tried in multiple simulators, including ImSim's one, the Assetto Corsa, and an iRacing, and the motion felt okay. You know, it feels really good, but there was something interesting in the Assetto Corsa EVO's motion integration. It felt a little bit better than all the other motions. I don't understand why. Maybe it's just placebo because everybody was very excited. But it's nice to know that Kunos was willing to experiment a bit and have a little bit of fun, even though it was an early alpha, so kudos to them. Obviously, it's one thing what you can have access to at the moment, and it was really good to see what we saw in Sim Racing Expo. It's the another part what was promised at Sim Racing Expo at the panel that Kunos had. And there's a lot of to talk about, to a point that sometimes it looks like over-promising. Don't get too hyped, because, you know, when you promise a lot, it might be the case that at the end of the day, the promises weren't being kept, or what was delivered kind of fell flat on its face. But it looks promising. From what I was able to understand, and I might be totally wrong here, this seems to have the trappings of a Gran Turismo or a Forza, but with the physics of an Assetto Corsa. So it seems to have progression. They're mentioning progression, they're mentioning car customization, they're also mentioning an open world. That kind of gives me the idea that it might be some sort of also a need for speed, where you move to one place to another place to get some missions, or to, you know, to complete some races. The open world, I might think, I can think that it's around the Nordschleife area, so you go to garages or something. It felt like it. They didn't really promise it, but they said open world. And when you put all of this together, it feels like a completely different thing from a sim racing game. What they were talking in the presentation was that they didn't want to do the same formula as before, you know, car track and go to race or something like that and do the laps. You know, a game just around that, because it's been done to that before and they want to try something different. So this scheme with progression, with vehicle customization, with avatar customization and all of that, it feels like they want to build a sim racing game that is bigger than just the regular formula that we have. Of course, it's one thing to promise that, it's another thing to deliver, because you can have a game behind the game, and the game that is behind the game isn't really as interesting as the part of driving that we already know, which is hot lapping, racing against the AI and all of that. And they didn't really speak about the AI, but the AI felt a little more aggressive than before. So there's this thing about Gran Turismo and Forza with Need for Speed, that at least I understood that what it is on a sim part, but also there's the indication that it will be multiplayer inside of the game, but it's a multiplayer integration that will be with SimGrid. This was something that I was mentioning back in 2019, I believe, when the early alpha or early access started to come in Assetto Corsa Competizione, where I mentioned that, yeah, it was needed to have something like this, something that was integrated, that kind of was a competition to iRacing without being iRacing, you know, something that is integrated. And, you know, Lufu Motorsports later did an external integration of it. But it's good to know that we're going to have a platform for multiplayer inside of the game. So in a way, Kunos is externalizing or put a third party in control of their multiplayer aspect. Of course, a lot of you, including myself, are driving in low fuel motorsports, and at least that what I was understood, it's not blocked for third-party applications or third-party groups. So I suppose that will be eventually some sort of API or some sort of implementation that will be able to happen in Assetto Corsa EVO. Also important is that there's no indication that this is going to be launched in the consoles. However, I must state that would be probably a mistake to not at least release it just after the game launches it. So even though there's no indication there will be console support for it, I wouldn't be surprised that the console support would come within, 3 or 6 months when it's better optimized or better ported to the PlayStation 5, the PlayStation Pro, PlayStation 5 Pro, or the Xbox. So, don't think there's not going to be an implementation, because I think it is. It happened with Assetto Corsa and also Assetto Corsa Competizione. So, keep an eye on that. And these are my collected thoughts, or more collected thoughts, about Assetto Corsa EVO in its state, and all the information we got, and all the information I was able to get by talking around with people as well. If you enjoy this, support the channel. I'm trying to get 100,000 subscribes. Press that subscribe button, press like, and thank you for watching. Just tell us below what you think about this.